It started with the trail cameras. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the sounds in the woods, not the feeling of being watched, not even the final, impossible images. It started with those cheap little plastic boxes my wife insisted on buying. "We need to see what's out there, Mark," Chloe had said, her voice a mix of excitement and that low-grade anxiety that always seemed to hum just beneath her surface. We were in a Bass Pro Shops outside of Charleston, a cathedral of camo and killing gear that felt alien to me. She was holding up a 2-pack of Browning game cameras. "For the property. It'll be fun." Fun. That was Chloe. She could spin a potential horror movie premise into a weekend project. She was like that with everything: gardening, home renovation, our marriage. She applied a relentless, almost manic optimism to life's inherent chaos. And God, she was beautiful when she was like that. Her green eyes, the color of moss on a sunlit stone, would widen with possibility. She had this way of tucking a strand of her dark, curly hair behind her ear, her fingers delicate and sure, that could make me forget whatever practical objection I was about to raise. We'd bought the cabin outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, 6 months earlier. It was supposed to be our escape. I was a freelance graphic designer, and she managed a boutique hotel in Columbus. Our life was all screens and schedules and the constant dull roar of the interstate. The cabin, nestled in the thick, rolling woods along the Canoe River, was going to be our digital detox, our return to something real. The reality, I discovered that first weekend in October, was a lot of dampness and the constant, whispering presence of the trees. The woods around Point Pleasant aren't like the tidy, spaced-out forests of a park. They're ancient, dense. The canopy swallows the light, and the undergrowth is a tangled wall of rhododendron and vine. It feels less like a place and more like a living, breathing entity. That Friday evening we just finished a simple dinner, pasta with a Jared sauce Chloe had doctored up, and were sitting on the porch, listening to the crickets and the distant, mournful call of a train horn. The air was cool and carried the rich, decaying smell of autumn leaves. Chloe was curled up in an Adirondack chair next to me, her legs tucked under her. She was wearing an old, soft flannel shirt of mine, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. The way it hung open just enough revealed the smooth, pale skin of her throat and the top of her chest. My eyes kept drifting to the gentle swell of her breasts beneath the thin cotton of her t-shirt, the way the fabric tightened when she shifted. I had a sudden vivid image of unbuttoning that flannel, slowly, my knuckles brushing against her skin. "Let's put the cameras up tomorrow," she said, breaking the silence in my train of thought. She took a sip of her wine, and I watched the line of her throat as she swallowed. "We can do a perimeter, see if we get any deer, maybe a fox. Or the Mothman," I said, grinning. She didn't smile back. Point Pleasant's claim to fame, the winged harbinger of doom, was a local industry and a tourist joke, but Chloe had read all the books. She found the story genuinely unsettling. "Don't," she said a little sharply, "it's not funny." "Sorry," I said, reaching over to squeeze her knee through the denim of her jeans. I could feel the firm muscle of her thigh. The inappropriate thought returned, a flash of heat amidst the chill evening, pulling her out of that chair, leading her inside to the rough-hewn log bed, muffling her sounds with my mouth. The fear in her eyes a moment ago would be replaced by something else entirely. I felt a twist of guilt. This was part of our problem. Maybe my mind went to these places too easily, especially when the silence between us stretched for too long. The next morning was bright and crisp. We spent a few hours tramping through the woods, choosing spots for the cameras. I did the technical work, formatting the SD cards, setting the sensitivity, while Chloe pointed out animal trails and scat with a surprising degree of knowledge. She'd been watching YouTube videos, she told me proudly. I remember watching her as she crouched down to examine a track near the creek that bordered the western edge of our property. Her jeans stretched taut across her hips and rear, outlining her shape perfectly against the dappled light. She looked up at me, her face smudged with a little dirt, and smiled. "Dear, I think." In that moment she was the girl I'd fallen for, capable, curious, radiantly alive. The lust I'd felt the night before softened into a deep, aching fondness. I wanted to protect that version of her from everything, especially from the shadows her own mind could conjure. We placed 4 cameras, point 1 facing the old fire road that led to the cabin. 1 aimed at the creek, point 1 on the trail that wound up into the thicker woods to the north, and the last one, at Chloe's insistence, pointing directly at the back of the cabin itself, covering the porch and the tree line just beyond. "Why that one?" I'd asked, strapping it to a pine tree. She hugged herself, though the sun was warm. "I don't know, just peace of mind." We spent the rest of the weekend hiking, reading, and trying to ignore the spotty cell service. That IT was good, that IT was normal. That we drove back to Columbus on Sunday evening, the car filled with the smell of wood smoke and pine, our muscles pleasantly sore. That I remember feeling optimistic. This was working. The cabin was going to be the thing that fixed us. The following Friday we drove back. The plan was to check the cameras first thing Saturday morning. Chloe was practically vibrating with anticipation during the entire 3-hour drive. She talked incessantly about what we might see: a family of raccoons, a majestic buck. That I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on her leg, feeling the warmth of her through her jeans, my thumb occasionally stroking the inseam. My mind wasn't on wildlife. That IT was on the bottle of wine we'd brought, the fire we'd build, the way the cabin's isolation seemed to amplify every touch, every sound. We got in late, the cabin cold and dark. That we built a fire, drank a glass of wine, and fell into bed, exhausted from the drive. The cameras could wait until morning. Saturday dawned gray and drizzly. After coffee, we pulled on our rain jackets and set out to collect the SD cards. The woods were different in the rain, the colors were muted, the sounds dampened. It felt more intimate, more closed. And that we started with the camera on the fire road. The card was full of images. A dozen deer, a fat groundhog, a red fox with a mouse in its mouth. Chloe was thrilled, scrolling through the images on my laptop back at the kitchen table. Her excitement was infectious. That I stood behind her, my hands on her shoulders, smelling the rain in her hair. That I kissed the side of her neck, and she leaned back into me with a soft sigh. "Let's see the next one," she said, her voice a little breathy. The creek camera showed more deer, and a blurry image of what might have been a river otter. The Northern Trail camera had less activity. That a few squirrels, a lone turkey. Then we got to the fourth card. The camera pointed at the cabin. The first images were of us, last Saturday afternoon, carrying our bags inside. There was a sequence of me splitting wood on the porch. Then night vision shots of a possum waddling past, its eyes glowing white. Nothing unusual. That we were about to close the laptop when Chloe said, "Wait. Go back." I scrolled back a few frames. That IT was a daytime shot from the day before, Friday, around 4:17 p.m. The timestamp was clear in the corner. The image showed the back of the cabin, the porch, the empty chairs. And there, just at the very edge of the frame where the woods began, was a figure. That IT was a man. That he was standing perfectly still, half hidden by the trunk of a large oak. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark, heavy-looking coat despite the mild weather, and his face was turned directly toward the camera. The resolution wasn't great, but you could make out the pale oval of his face, dark holes for eyes. That he wasn't looking at the cabin. That he was looking at the camera. That's if he knew it was there. "Who is that?" Chloe whispered. Her earlier excitement had vanished, replaced by a tight fear. "I don't know," I said, trying to sound calm. "A hiker? Maybe he got lost." It was a weak explanation. Our property wasn't on any marked trail. That IT was private land, posted with no trespassing signs. "Zoom in," she said, her fingers digging into my arm. That I zoomed, the pixels blurred, but the details became more unsettling. The coat was too long, too formal. That IT looked like an old overcoat. His hair was dark and lank, plastered to his forehead. And his posture was wrong. That he wasn't resting against the tree or pausing to get his bearings. That he was rigid, like a soldier at attention. His hands were shoved deep into his coat pockets. "He's just standing there," Chloe said. Her voice was trembling now. "Mark, he's just staring." We scrolled through the rest of the images. That he appeared in 3 more shots over the next 20 minutes, always in the same spot, always in that same rigid stance. Then he was gone. The camera captured nothing else until the possum hours later. That should have been the end of it. A creepy guy in the woods. That we could have called the sheriff, filed a report, and maybe that would have been that. But it was the next set of images that changed everything. That we had reset the cameras before we left last Sunday. This was the new batch from the past week while we were back in Columbus. The first few days were empty. Then, on Wednesday afternoon, the camera on the Northern Trail triggered. That IT was a sequence of 3 images. The first was of a deer, bounding away. The second was empty, just the trail. The third was him. The same man? But he wasn't at the edge of the woods anymore, that he was standing in the middle of the trail, closer to the camera. His face was more visible, that he had high, sharp cheekbones and a gaunt, hollow-cheeked look. His mouth was a thin, straight line. And his eyes, even in the low-resolution image, they seemed to be looking directly into the lens, with an unnerving intensity, that he was holding something pale and small in one hand that it was hard to make out, but it looked like a child's toy, a doll, maybe. How did he get there? Chloe's voice was a thin wire of panic. We were in Columbus. No one was here. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Maybe the timestamp is wrong. A glitch. But the timestamps on the other cameras were perfectly synchronized. It showed Wednesday, 2:04 p.m. We checked the other cards with a growing sense of dread. The Fire Road camera had captured him on Thursday morning, just after dawn. He was walking away from the cabin, his back to the camera, his long coat swaying. The Creek camera had him on Thursday evening, standing on the opposite bank, staring across the water toward the cabin. And then the final card, the one from the camera, pointed at the cabin itself. The first image was from Friday night, around 9 p.m., last night. It was a night vision shot, everything rendered in ghostly green and black. The porch was empty. But standing in the center of the frame, no more than 10 feet from the back door, was the man. He was closer than he'd ever been. His face was a pale mask, his dark eyes like pits. He was no longer holding the doll. Instead, his arms were hanging limp at his sides. And he was smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a wide, grotesque stretch of the lips that showed too much teeth. A rictus of pure malice. The timestamp on that image was 9:08 p.m. Last night. While we were driving here. While the cabin was supposed to be empty. Chloe made a small, choked sound and pushed away from the table. She ran to the bathroom, and I heard her retching. I just sat there, staring at the screen. The man's smile seemed to burn into my retinas. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a trespasser. This was something else. This was a violation that felt personal, targeted. I called the Mason County Sheriff's Office. The deputy who took my call was polite but skeptical. He took down the information, asked if anything was stolen or vandalized. When I said no, just the photos, his tone shifted to one of mild annoyance. Lot of folks wander through those woods, sir. Hunter's kits, your property's posted, but that doesn't always stop him. We'll add a patrol if we can, but resources are thin. He was here last night, I insisted. He was on my porch. The camera's time could be off, he said, echoing my own weak excuse from minutes before, which now felt insultingly naive. We'll make a note of it. You folks just keep your doors locked. After I hung up, I felt utterly helpless. The official world had dismissed our fear. We were alone with this. Chloe emerged from the bathroom, her face pale and tear-streaked. She went straight to the door and threw the deadbolt, then checked all the windows. Her movements were jerky, frantic. I wanted to hold her, to comfort her, but my own fear had frozen me in place. The cozy cabin now felt like a trap. The large picture windows, which had once offered beautiful views of the forest, now felt like vulnerabilities. The woods, our sanctuary, had become a hiding place. The rest of the day passed in a fog of tension. We jumped at every creak of the old cabin, every snap of a branch outside. I tried to work, opening my laptop, but I just stared at the screen, seeing that smiling face superimposed over my design software. Chloe sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the fire. The sexual energy I'd felt that morning was gone, replaced by a cold, shared dread. My earlier fantasies about her felt stupid and distant, a relic from a more innocent time. As evening fell, the rain intensified, drumming a steady rhythm on the metal roof. The wind picked up, moaning through the pines. We ate a silent dinner of canned soup. I kept getting up to peer out the windows, but the world was a wall of wet, shifting darkness. I saw nothing but the reflection of my own frightened face. Around 10 p.m., we decided to try to get some sleep. It was a futile gesture. We lay in bed in the dark, listening to the storm. Chloe was curled against me, her back to my chest, her body rigid. I could feel the frantic beat of her heart through her pajamas. My arm was around her, my hand resting on her stomach. Under different circumstances, the feel of her, warm and soft against me, would have been an invitation. Now, it was just an anchor point in a sea of fear. My mind, however, betrayed me that I in the darkness, with the sound of the rain, my senses narrowed to the physical reality of her, the scent of her shampoo, the curve of her hip under my palm, the way her breathing hitched with every gust of wind. That a part of me, a deep, primal part, wanted to lose myself in her, to use the physical act as a way to blot out the terror. It was a disgusting, selfish thought, and it made me feel even more isolated. That I was scared, and I was horny, and the two feelings were twisted together into a sickening knot. That's when we heard it, that a thump from the porch. It wasn't loud. It could have been a branch falling in the wind. But it was a distinct, solid sound. Chloe gasped and clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. We lay there, not moving, not breathing. The only sound was the rain. Then, another sound, a slow, deliberate scraping, like something being dragged across the wooden planks of the porch. I slowly, carefully untangled myself from Chloe. "Stay here," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Don't go out." "There, Mark," she begged, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't plan to. I crept out of the bedroom and into the main living area. The room was dark, lit only by the dying embers of the fire. I picked up the heavy cast iron poker from the hearth. It felt cold and solid in my hand. My heart was a trip hammer in my chest. I moved toward the back door, my bare feet silent on the cold floorboards. I stopped a few feet from the door, listening. The scraping had stopped. All I could hear was the rain. Then a soft tap on the glass of the door's window. Not a knock, a tap, like a single finger gently touching the pane. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. I stared at the door, at the rectangle of darkness in the window. I couldn't see anything outside. Tap, tap, tap. It was closer to the doorknob now, deliberate, patient. I should have woken my phone, called 911. But my mind was blank with fear. All I could do was stand there, gripping the fireplace poker, my knuckles white. The tapping stopped. A long minute passed. Then I heard a new sound, a faint, wet rustling. It took me a moment to place it. It was the sound of the plastic box on the trail camera, being opened and closed. He was at the camera. The one pointed at the porch. The one that had taken his picture. A moment later, I heard a soft, thudding footstep on the gravel path leading